So this session, of course, is going to be recorded. However, I wish to welcome everyone who's here and kind of coming in to the AFSA Science Communication Workshop. If you don't know, my name is Lowell. I am the current executive chair of AFSA. I use they pronouns. I'm calling in from Miami, Florida. I'm okay with the hurricane, but do send your thoughts for those that are in the southwest area of Florida, as well as those who are also affected by hurricanes and typhoons in the Philippines. So this is our second of a series of workshops that is part of the Mentor-Mentee program, but pretty much anyone from AFSA can join. The SiteCom workshop is one of the activities of AFSA, and we have a goal of providing practical knowledge, skills, and advice on how to carry out effective science communication. Of course, this meeting will be recorded and will be available throughout the AFSA Facebook and YouTube channels upon the finishing of the event. Just please to keep yourselves muted throughout this presentation portion, unless we have any question and answer portion or any interactive sessions, which we'll certainly have. And I would like to pass it off to Cynthia.
Sure. Thanks, Lowell. Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia Cindy Garcia Idel, pronoun she, her. So yes, the goal today is to learn, to engage, and to provide the space for learning and relearning. And as we create this space together, please contribute in promoting it as a safe, productive, inclusive, and encouraging space, right? So if at any time there's something we can do to make anyone more comfortable, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Lowell or to Kalai. So, all right, so to give a quick overview of our plan for today, we start with introductions, right? So since we have a relatively big group today, we encourage everyone to please introduce yourselves in the chat with your name, your pronouns, and affiliation, and also where you're calling from, and if it's your first time to join us with AFSA, right? Also, please include any exciting hobby or activity that you started or picked up this summer in your introductions. Again, your name, your pronouns, your affiliation, where you're calling from, and any hobby or activity that you started or you picked up this summer. So while you do that, I'll continue with our overview of our schedule. So we'll have our land acknowledgement, and then followed by a brief introduction to AFSA by Lowell, followed by our two exciting workshops by Liz Weinberg and Irene Crisologo. So we'll then have an open discussion. So we'll open the floor for discussions, for community updates, and opportunities for involvement for everyone. So before we get started, any initial comments or questions or suggestions about our agenda from the group? All right, hearing none, I'll pass it over to Lowell for the introduction. Land acknowledgement. I'll go through this. Land acknowledgement. So we are here to pay respect to our Indigenous people of the past, present, and future, to the Lenape Nation of Manhattan and beyond, where AFSA started its history, and the many different Indigenous peoples of our homeland, the Philippines. As residents of the US, we recognize our participation in this conflicted history, and we want to acknowledge that Indigenous lands and waters are not bounded by colonial political lines. As Filipinos, we reflect on the intersection of our identities as a byproduct of colonization. The complex role of our history has led us to be an amalgamation of complicit bystanders, allies, and even colonizers. As scientists, we acknowledge and honor the place-based knowledge of Indigenous peoples and their ancestral and contemporary stewardship of our homelands. We will continue to learn, gain a better understanding of the different cultures, and do our best to improve as allies. And now I'll pass it to Lowell.
Totally. So for those that are not too familiar or feel like need a clean refresher on what AFSA is, we are a community of Filipino, Filipina, and Filipinx scientists in America seeking to utilize our collective expertise and resources to support our communities in the Philippines and the US. We are over 200 members strong in different stages of our science careers from various states in the US. These cute little dots right here are representative of where a lot of our members are from. And we have a full diversity of different fields where our members can be, anywhere from agriculture to biology to chemistry and computer science to public health and engineering, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, there is much more that must be said about it. I will not go through the entirety of the objectives, but I want to show how vast and how broad our mission and values of AFSA are. We range from professional development to advocacy. And I will be highlighting that our executive committee is 8 members strong, but I want to give highlights to the advocacy committee because Cynthia has been, of the advocacy committee, has been running and operating this program very well. And of course, we definitely need help on programming of advocacy committee. What does the advocacy committee do? Anything from online to in-person stuff. Our bread and butter has been webinars, and which ranging from individual identity to complex situations in the Philippines. We've also done written statements from issues such as Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate to the junking the terror law and defending press freedom and no to red tagging in the Philippines. In-person stuff, we have done COVID test drives, and if social conditions depended, there's interest in doing that again, do reach out to us. And so that is a very quick and dirty spiel of what AFSA is and what we do. I'll pass it on to Cynthia.
I was muted. All right, thanks, Lowell. And yeah, and thank you everyone who started already introducing yourselves in the chat, but we have lots of opportunities to, learn more about each other during this workshop. So, okay, so let's start. We'll just get started with our workshop today. So I have the pleasure to introduce our wonderful speakers today. And I have been a fan of Liz and her amazing work at the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee. And I'm so excited to have her here today with us. So Liz Weinberg is a queer science communicator and essayist. She serves as the engagement director for the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, helping connect Arctic researchers, federal agencies, and communities, and is an author of the essay collection, Unsettling, Surviving Extinction Together. So it's forthcoming next month. A fun fact about Liz is that one of her favorite fun facts is that pack rat urine can preserve plant matter for study for 40,000 years in desert environments. Really, that's really interesting. And yeah, I'll turn it over to Liz.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I'm gonna get my screen shared. And now I'll do the awkward webinar question of, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I've been working with Cindy for this past year and also a huge fan of her. And I'm really excited to be here with you today. As a science communicator, I have kind of a weird background. I'm not a scientist. I studied anthropology and creative writing in college and grad school, and then decided, hey, I like science too, and I bet I can actually find some work putting these together. So I know stuff about science, but I also don't do it myself. But I think in some ways that positions me well to be a science communicator and get to talk to folks about what science is and why it's important. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about science communication as connection. Just a couple of housekeeping items. So one, because we've got half an hour, we're not going to do breakout rooms, but I am going to have us do solo writing sessions throughout, just some brainstorming. So I'll ask you to either put things in the chat if you want to share with other folks, or to just brainstorm on your own and, on a notebook or on a Google Doc or whatever you feel like using. If you need to step away from the computer, no worries. But I do love it if folks have their camera on if you're feeling that today, just so that I can kind of get a sense of the vibe in the room. I'm also going to share what or change what I'm sharing. So I have this other thing that I will put in the chat, which is a link to this Jamboard. So this is for sort of your burning questions. So things that are coming up for you, you want to talk about, but they're a little bit off topic. You can put them in here at any time during the presentation, and I will come back to it in the last 5 minutes or so. These are all sticky notes that you can edit just by double clicking them. And they have an underscore in them because I have to put some text in them, but you can just say, here is my question. And there it'll be. So I will grab this link for you and put it in the chat. And yeah, at any time, drop any kind of question you've got in there. And now back to my slides. So just to get a sense of where everyone is with science communication, I would love to do a quick emoji poll. So if you all click the reactions button on your Zoom toolbar, you have a bunch of emojis you can share. And so I'd like to know, if you are totally new to science communication, you're like, I don't even really know what science communication is, please use the party popper. If you're kind of familiar with it, the applause. If you've done it a bunch, the heart emoji. So I'm seeing some hearts, some folks who've done a bunch of science communication, a good spread. Awesome. People who are kind of familiar, a few people who haven't really done science communication at all, and that is fantastic. So this is going to be very basic, sort of an intro, because we could easily spend an entire semester or an entire degree talking about science communication. But as our friend, the inhaling seagull says, when science communication is done right, it can help build bridges between scientists and communities. And I also, everyone here has their own expertise and their own background. So I definitely encourage folks to share your own tips throughout, whether in the chat or in that burning questions Jamboard. And my hope is to leave you today with some tips and ideas for how to better communicate the work that you're doing, focusing on thinking through your own perspective, your audience, and your goals. So for me, especially I think because I have a background in creative writing and anthropology, for me, science communication is very much about building those connections. It's about stories, and stories are what connect us. So that's really where I'm coming from here. And with that in mind, let's start with you, because you can't tell a story without an author. So historically, science communication has really been thought of as a one-way thing. It's the deficit model, right? People don't have the information. They don't know about climate change, and we need to tell them about climate change, or they don't know about pack rat urine, and they really need to know because that's a really cool fact. And that's, it's certainly one way to do science communication. But more recently, a lot of practitioners are starting to view communication from a more relational standpoint. So everyone here in this room, everyone in the world has things to learn from one another. And so it's not so much about unidirectional delivery of information and more about learning where the gaps are. So why information might matter to someone, and why, how we can empower them to use that information. So why might someone care about pack rat urine, or why someone might care about climate change because they're in the path of hurricanes. And so if you're going to do that for other people, you also really need to be open to the same thing happening to you as a communicator. You've got to be willing to think and reflect about where my knowledge gaps are, and why do I care about this information, and why am I even showing up and doing this? And I also really like to think of science communication as service. So it's not so much that we're just showing up and saying, hey, we know a lot of things. And I want you to know those things, but rather saying, hey, communities, you know what you need. You know what's important to you. How can I help you as someone who has expertise in a certain area, figure out, where your gaps in your knowledge are? How can I help fill those gaps? How can I help you get to your goals? So with that in mind, good communication really starts with you understanding your own role. And so things to think about before you even start science communication are obviously what to research about. You want to know what you're communicating. But then why do you actually care about it? Like, why do you do your work every day? Why are you showing up to work? Why are you showing up to the lab? Why does it matter to you? What relationships have made your work possible? Are you working with lab mates? Are you working with other communities? Do you have a partner who is helping you be able to spend time doing your PhD and caring for your dog or your kid? Where are the people coming in to your work? Another thing to think about is, what do you bring to the table? So this is, okay, yeah, you've got expertise in a certain area, you've got your science, but then also, are you a really good interpersonal communicator? Or are you an amazing artist? How can you help bring this this thing to a community in a way that's going to help them. And then also, understanding what your key values are. So are you the sort of person who values objective truth above all else? You're like, I need to know exactly, I'm just going to keep harping on this. I need to know exactly why pack rat urine is such a good preservative. And I need to know the exact reason. It's not important to me what it smells like, or, what it is as a metaphor, but I really need to know, like, how's this work? Or are you the sort of person who really values learning? It's not so much what pack rat urine does, but the process of learning what it does. Or are you the sort of person who values listening? You want to actually talk to other folks and hear what they know. And so these are just sort of some questions to start thinking through before you even start communicating. And so with that in mind, I want to spend a couple of minutes doing a brainstorm. So thinking about why your research or your work matters to you personally and why you bother doing it. So I'm going to put some music on while we do the brainstorming. So if you don't want to hear the music, just turn down your volume, and I'll note in the chat when we're coming back. You can keep your camera on, you can turn it off. We'll do about 3 minutes, I think. So again, just jot down, you can either put this in the chat if you want to share with folks, or if you want to just use your own notebook or Word doc, that works as well. And just thinking through, why does your research or your work matter to you personally? All right, come on back, wrap up your thought. And I would love it now if everyone would put just 3 words in the chat that describe why you do your work. discovery, curiosity, impact, water resources, people. Inspiration, serenity, community, neurodiversity, awareness, expanding on what's left to discover, creativity, theoretical and applied appreciation. Yeah, loving all of these. I think so. Keep putting these in the chat. I think it's really good to both know this for yourself and to see what your fellow researchers, why they find their research important, and just hold on to this, because this is important both for science communication and also for burnout. I think there's a lot put on us as folks in the research realm, and having sort of this sense of why you're doing what you're doing can really help you going forward and find that resilience. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about relationships. And so science communication, I think at its fundamental basis is about relationship building, and it's about empathy, so whether it's short-term or long-term. And so if you are thinking about building a relationship with someone for the next 5 minutes because you're just chatting with them, or you're trying to build awareness about something over the long term, you need to think about audience. You can't communicate with the same way about a thing with everyone. Think about like the way you would talk to your mom is really different from the way that you would talk to a classmate, which is really different from the way you would talk to a random person on the street. They're all coming from different perspectives, and so you're going to want to tailor what you're the way you're talking to different folks. And I think it's also because science communication is about relationships, it's really important to think about emotion. And that's for two reasons. One, I said I come from a storytelling background. People remember and learn not because the information is just clear, but because they've made a meaningful connection. Like, you tell them a story and they relate to it, or they're really feeling something about it. Maybe it made them really mad, but they're going to remember it if they've got some kind of emotional connection. And so thinking through like what emotion you want to evoke in people can be very helpful. The other thing with emotion is that I think in science and as scientists, we're trained to be objective and put emotions aside, because really what we need to do is find that truth and figure out, God, I'm just going to keep harping on this, why rat urine is such a good preservative in the desert. You don't think about how that's a really funny thing. It's like, no, it's just like, you got to find the fact. But really a lot of the work that we're doing, I'm looking at the words you all were putting in the chat. You've got water resources, you've got neurodiversity and awareness, you've got making a difference, and you've got immunity. These are big things. Mental health, these trigger emotions in people. Research has real world implications for people, and that can, emotions can run hot. That can trigger anger, it can trigger uncertainty, it can trigger fear, it can trigger excitement. And so we've got to actually think about the fact that, yeah, okay, people are going to feel things about our research. We're going to feel things about our research, and that's normal and good. And let's actually think through that instead of pretending it doesn't happen. So some things to think about when you're talking about relationships and science communication as relationship is, first of all, who's your audience? If you just sort of come up with a science communication plan, you're like, my audience is the general public, you're going to have troubles. It's not going to work as well as you want it to. So thinking through, okay, like who specifically am I trying to reach? Am I trying to reach third graders? Am I trying to reach people who think that climate change is real, but like aren't really willing to do anything about it? Am I trying to reach people who haven't gotten their COVID-19 vaccine yet? Thinking through who those people are. And then thinking through what's their history with your topic. So different groups are going to have different ways, different backgrounds with your research. And they may have history with your topic ranging from, I've never heard of pack rats before, to research on pack rats has actually actively harmed me in the past. And thinking through that and understanding that beforehand is going to help you shape the way that you communicate. So for example, I work in the Arctic these days, or I work with folks who work in the Arctic these days. And one topic that gets researched is bowhead whales. And so if you're communicating with someone from the lower 48 about bowhead whales, they're probably going to see whales as sort of that symbol of like a pure sort of nature. Like everyone loves whales. They're really cool. They're really big. We whaled them and now we hunted them and now they're cool. But you know, it's like they're distant. That doesn't really immediately impact them. It's just sort of like the yay, nature. On the other hand, someone from like a northern indigenous community has a direct connection to bowhead whales. And they also have a history of the research on the whales being used to restrict their access to an important food source. So they're going to have a whole bunch of different feelings that come up and a you know, sense of trust or mistrust that comes up when you're talking about bowhead whales. Another thing to think about is what someone's values are. You know, this is how you're actually going to connect with someone. So we talked about thinking about what your values are, and understanding how your values and their values fit together can help you communicate. So do they care about family? Do they care about legacy? Do they care about discovery? Do they care about facts? You know, what is driving them? And then finally, you've got to think through, what do they actually already know about your topic? You know, so are they experts in their own right? You know, if they're dealing with mental health stuff all the time and you're researching mental health, or are they totally new to the topic? They've never heard of a pack rat and don't know why I keep talking about pack rat urine. And so thinking through these things is going to help you figure out, like, how am I going to frame my research and what do I want to do with it? So we're going to do another quick brainstorm. So we've got, you might be trying to reach out to a bunch of different audiences. So it's helpful to think through, you know, one audience at a time. So pick an audience you'd like to communicate with, and spend some time thinking about, you know, what do they know about your topic? Why do they care about your topic? Wherein might emotion be sparked? And how does your research or your topic serve this community? So I will give us, I think, 3 to 5 minutes. And yeah, again, I'll put some music on, turn down your volume if you don't want to hear it, and I will actually put in the chat when we're coming back this time. I forgot to do it last time. So yeah, I'll stop talking for a couple minutes. All right, wrap up that thought. Cindy, Lowell, I'm thinking I have like 10 more minutes. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct, Liz.
Okay, great. I realized I didn't actually mark when we'd started. Cool. So if everyone could just put 1 to 5 in the chat how you're feeling. 1, I'm totally lost. 5, I'm totally with you and feel like I'm learning some things. Awesome. All right, seeing 5s and 4s. Sweet. Just wanted to make sure wasn't leaving anyone behind. Cool. So I'm going to move on to our sort of third and final point. And that is that science communication has a goal. Please, 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 please never do science communication just to do it. Don't say, I'm going to go tell people about this thing just for, for kicks is a totally valid reason. But the best science communication has a clear goal, and that goal is going to shape the form that your science communication is going to take. So first of all, think about your goal. Why are you even talking about this science? Why am I talking about pack rats constantly? 1, I only know how to tell one joke and then beat it to death. But 2, examples might be, okay, you want someone to change their behavior. You want someone to get vaccinated. You want an informed policy. We need to take action on climate change. You want a community to have the information they need to be safe and to support one another. And so, I want people to know that my topic exists is a good starting point, but I think always try to go beyond that. So why does it actually matter that your topic exists, that your research is being done? And your goal along with your audience, so once you put all of these little pieces together, are going to impact the form your science communication takes. So for example, if you are trying to get folks to change their behavior and you're specifically trying to reach younger folks, social media campaign. If you are trying to get a specific action to be taken on climate change, a policy brief might be a good thing. If you want someone to get vaccinated, maybe that's a one-on-one discussion. If you want to help support mental health resilience in your community, maybe a community meeting is the way to go. But thinking through, what is it that you actually want to do is going to help you shape the way you do it. And so always be thoughtful about what tool you're using and why. And so to wrap up, we're going to do two more minutes of brainstorming. My goal is for you to sort of leave with a mini social media plan. And so thinking about what is your goal and what tool might you use to reach it. Again, going to put some music on. If you don't want to hear it, just turn the volume down. All right, turning the music off, gonna bring us back for a couple more minutes. I really appreciate folks for sharing their goals in the chat. Y'all are doing really cool things. So for the last couple of minutes, I just want to pull up that Jamboard that I shared at the beginning. And this is for any sort of off-topic questions you've got. So here's the chat, here's the link again. See, we've got one question, which is thoughts on how to make math jargon or heavy terms or concepts more approachable to lay people. Great question. First of all, totally encourage anyone to share tips for that in the chat. Love to crowdsource answers to these. For me, finding terminology that's not the jargon. So finding words that you can use that are not the words you sort of need like 3 definitions to understand. But metaphor, I think, is the way to go, and telling that story, telling a story with it. So it's not necessarily that you need someone to understand the exact math behind something or the exact concept behind it, but why does it matter to them? And what metaphor can you use to do that? As an example, my partner is a aerospace engineer, and they went to a rocket launch from a company that's basically using centrifugal force, not a scientist, to get rockets in the air instead of combustion. And I'm like, I don't understand how this works. And they described it to me. And I was like, oh, it's basically someone doing shot put with a rocket. So they're spinning it around really, really, really fast and then letting it go. And I don't need to know the math behind it. I just need to know, like, this is how they're doing it. And it's different than let's make something explode at the end of a rocket and send it up into space. And so figuring out what the metaphor you can use there, or you can, the story you can tell, can help people get to where you need to go. Not seeing any other questions in the Jamboard, and recognizing that I'm almost out of time. I am just going to wrap up real quick once I figure out where my slide thing is. So that's my email up on the board. It's liz@iarpiccollaborations.org. And I just want to leave with a couple of thoughts. The first is self-care is really, really important. Science communication is often uncompensated. It's often thankless. It can be emotionally draining. If you are not a white cis hetero male, you're often going to be questioned and people aren't going to listen to you as much. And that's really frustrating, but make sure you're taking care of yourself and giving yourself opportunities to rest. If you learn nothing else, or you take nothing else away today, it's take care of yourselves. You can't do good science communication if you're burnt out. So I leave you with that. I've also got a couple of resources that I will put in the chat. Getting to the Heart of Science Communication is a fantastic book about science communication. A lot of what I talked to you about today is drawn from there. Compass is an organization that does science communication training. They're fabulous. MIT has communication kits for different audiences and different types of communication. And then the Inclusive SciComm Symposium is really good if you want to be thinking about making your science communication accessible. And finally, please reach out to me if you want to talk SciComm, or if you've got questions or comments or anything like that. I am always, always, always happy to talk about science communication. So with that, I will say thank you. I appreciate you taking the time with me today.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was amazing. Really puts everything in perspective, right? Knowing the why, and then thinking about the how for sure really helps. And yeah, Liz, just for your attention information, there's also other questions in the Jamboard. So yeah, feel free to just perhaps answer them in the chat, or I don't know how they, maybe you can also reach out to Liz. She provided her email. So thanks again, Liz. Really, really, really appreciate it. And now we will move on to our next workshop coordinator speaker. We have Dr. Irene Crisologo, and she will talk about illustrations and animations to communicate your science. So Irene, also a big fan of Irene and her creativity. Irene is a data analyst by day and an illustrator by night. She creates animations for the AGU podcast, Third Pod from the Sun, and dreams to be a full-time science animator someday. Fun fact about Irene, she recently learned that the water in the moon may be potentially coming from the Earth. So take it away, Irene, and yeah, feel free to share your screen.
Thanks, Cynthia. All right. From the beginning. All right. So thanks so much, Liz, for that wonderful kind of bit of or intro about how science communication should be done, and that's a lot of good things to think about. But so let's say you've done what Liz has recommended. You've thought about your whys and your hows of your approach to science communication. Sorry, I was just starting a timer. And maybe you thought that your approach needs some kind of visual. Then I hope this next topic can help you with that. And so I will talk about illustrations and animations to communicate your science. And to start, just a little background about myself. So, like many of us, I am from the Philippines. I was born in Manila, did my undergrad and master's there. Then I went to Germany to do my PhD, and then to the US to do my postdoc, and then and then now I'm based in Amsterdam. I'm a data analyst for Elsevier. But as the intro said, I am still very much active in science communication and science illustration. I'm doing it kind of as a hobby and side job, kind of. And so why did I start making these drawings and animations? So initially I started doing it for myself. I wanted to create visuals that are currently not available. Create visuals that currently available images or diagrams do not show. Like I tried to search for stuff from the internet just for presentations, just to have visuals, and sometimes they don't exist. And that happens a lot when you're doing research, because maybe what you're doing is like super new and something it's not been done before, so there's no visual yet for that. Maybe you can make your own. Another reason is to understand concepts better. So if you're familiar with the Feynman technique, it's pick and study a topic or concept, pretend to teach it to a child or to someone not very familiar with your topic. And through that, you can identify any gaps in your understanding. And then once you have identified the gaps, you can fill that in by reading again or doing more research, and then try to explain it again. And by doing that process, it improves your understanding of concepts. So for illustrations, sometimes some drawings are meant to be still, if they're in a textbook or in a paper. They're meant to be still. And you have time to look at each part of it. So if you want to convey movement, if you find yourself drawing and then having a lot of arrows showing where things go or how things move, why not try animation? So it can be as simple as a wave propagating, or like a ball rolling down a hill, or a wave or a movement by a person. And the building blocks of an animation are still illustrations called frames. So frames are basically a series of still animations where there's a slight change between each one of them. So for example, we see here these frames, we see that there's a slight change in the size or the size of the volcano, and also the placement of the crust that is subducting. And then when you put them all together, you have a very very basic animation. And later on, I'll tell you, if you want to make these things, what tools can you use and how to get them. So what I showed before was digital illustration, but if you don't know how to use a tool, or if you don't have a tool to draw digitally, don't let that stop you, because you can also draw. I don't know if you've done this also when you were younger, but when I was younger, I used to draw on the corners of my notebooks and flip them to make like a flip animation. And that's still the very heart of animation, by the way, which is making a series of frames. And so you can do that on your notebook, on consecutive pages. Just draw the different frames, and then you can flip it and just watch it animate itself. Or if you take pictures of it, you can put it together in your computer and then make very simple corner of the notebook animation. Another tip I like to give when thinking about like how to make your animations is to think about 1 or 2 action verbs. So sometimes it can get overwhelming. Like, oh, I want to draw, I don't know, let's say going back to that subduction. I want to draw the subduction, the plate going down, and then the volcano erupting, and then the plate melting, and so on. And sometimes it can get overwhelming. So to make it simpler and make it also easier for you to draw it, highlight only 1 or 2 action verbs. So for example, in this short animation, the action verb is fluctuate. So the sun's temperature fluctuates. And so to do that, we drew a simple series of 3 images where the temperature changed. And that's the only thing that changed. Everything else remained the same. Put them together, and then you can give the message that it fluctuates. Okay, so the tools. I have been using these 2 tools very heavily for doing the illustration and animation. First is MS PowerPoint. The advantage of that is that almost everyone uses it. Almost everyone has it. It's everywhere. People are very familiar with it since it's everywhere. But the disadvantage is it's not free. If you have like an institutional account, that's great. If not, that's the downside. It's not free. Another tool I use is called the Autodesk Sketchbook. But this one is free, and that's what I like about it. And it operates on Windows, on Mac OS, even on mobile. However, the disadvantage is, so it works best with pen and tablet. You can still use it with just a mouse. I've done it, and it's just a little bit harder. But if you have a pen and tablet, then that makes it easier. But that's not a very strong limitation. Okay, so Autodesk Sketchbook, it has layer functions, so you can draw. Let's say you have an image that you want to draw over, you can do that. Make fun, stupid images like this. Also PowerPoint, it has a draw function. So you can either draw it by hand like this if you have a pen or tablet, or if you are comfortable with a mouse, or you can also just draw shapes. So for animating, I use the same exact 2 tools. So PowerPoint and Sketchbook. So for Autodesk Sketchbook, it has a feature called Flipbook, where it gives you a series of frames that you can draw. So it's like the pages of the notebook corners of the notebook. You have one page for each frame. You can draw on each one. And then when you put them together, you have an animation. So it has, you can set the dimensions of the frames, the frame rate of the animation, how many frames you need. And then, once you export it and set the frame rate and the size and the format, you can have an animation like this. So this is roughly maybe 70 frames. Yeah, it's not like quick and easy to make, but it's fun and it can exercise your thought. You don't want to make the topic too complicated that you have to draw so many frames. It helps you distill the thought on what's actually there, what's really important. Yeah, so this is an example. For PowerPoint, you can also make animations. So frames, your frames are the slides. You can you can draw on each slide and then export that as an animated GIF or GIF. You can set the time for each slide. You can set which slides to convert, create a GIF, and then you have a very, very basic animation. And so knowing all those tools, you can create whatever illustration or animation you want, and hopefully you'll share it. So there are different ways to share it. Going back to what Liz has mentioned earlier, think about your audience. Who do you want to see what you made? Is it for a presentation? Is it for, let's say, thesis defense? So I started making my animations specifically for my PhD defense because I want to give the audience I knew who my audience was. It was, of course, the people from the university, not necessarily doing the same research as I am. So I knew I needed to make some sort of introductory slides on what I'm doing, what the tool is about, how the weather radars work. But also I knew that I didn't have to, get all the nitty-gritty details of all the math that is involved and all the engineering stuff that is involved. So know your audience and know what you need to share. So presentations is one. Another way to share it is by doing outreach. And this is one of my favorite ways to share these animations. So in this particular outreach, what I did is I did a Skype scientist session with, I think this particular one was from 5th graders or maybe 4th. And so I wanted to talk to them about weather. And so what I did was I asked their teacher if they can provide me some of their illustrations that I thought I could animate for them. So kind of bringing their sketches to life and letting the kids kind of trying to see where they're trying to kind of give life to their illustration. And this was fun for me as it is for them. So that was nice. And of course, social media. That's probably the most common way to share anything right now. Okay, examples of what I've done. So in the next few slides, I'm just going to show examples of what I've done. These are illustrations. These are illustrations I made over pictures that I took on a trip. The left one is in a cave, and I remember seeing this stalactite and stalagmite almost meeting, forming a column, but they're just not quite there. And sometimes, I don't know, my mind makes up stories, and I just thought creating like a little comic like this is fun. The audience is me, but I just thought I'd share it with others who might find it fun as well. Another thing I found interesting in that cave is this formation called whale's mouth, and it immediately gave me like an image of a whale with that kind of deformed teeth, and yeah, just thought I'd make something fun. Yeah. Another, oh, I mentioned earlier or in the introduction that I make some animations for the AGU podcast. And these are examples of the animations I made for them. So the context here is the brief is like a 3-second animation that would just get the attention of the people scrolling through maybe Twitter or Instagram, and hopefully they'll stop and see the post about the podcast topic. And so that's kind of the goal, just to make something visually appealing, make them stop for a bit, watch it, and then maybe see the podcast. So for the first one, I think the brief or the topic was just personal stories. Different scientists have their own different personal stories that they share in the podcast. The second one is about ice and glaciers and how glacial tourism is changing over the years because of climate change. And then the third one is the favorite fact that I have, which is that the moon is stealing ice from the earth. This is a recent, maybe not so recent, but kind of recent research paper that I've read, where they, based on, what was that? Based on like samples that they've taken, I think from the moon or the what's that? The atmosphere. Sorry, not the moon, but the atmosphere. They knew that when the solar flares are happening, and it shows like it changes the magnetosphere of the Earth. So that's when there are solar flares and it affects the ions in the atmosphere. Sometimes when the moon is behind the Earth, and the Earth is between the moon and the sun, those solar flares shoot ions out of the Earth's atmosphere and into the path of the moon. So the moon gets some of those ions, and then that becomes water in the moon. And so the idea is kind of like the moon is stealing ice from the Earth. Yeah, so those are some examples. And this is another one. This is the last one I have. And this is just 1 minute. I made this. I should pause it first. Okay, let's watch it first. This is just a minute, and then I explain. There's no sound, so don't worry about that. Okay, so let me pause that and just exit the. Where I pause? Oh, there we go. So, so that's a 1-minute animation that I made for a PhD student in my lab when I was in Northwestern University. He had a paper published in Nature, and so the university wanted to have a media or a press release about his paper, and they wanted like an accompanying, let's say, video abstract to the paper. So like a short 1-minute explainer of what the paper is about. And the idea is to not explain like the entirety of the paper, but more have something to pique the interest of the audience. And then if they find it interesting and they want to learn more about it, then they can go to the paper and read more about what his study was, which was looking at stellar flares and seeing if that can tell us more about life on other planets. And so yeah, so that's what that short video is about. And so that's my presentation about animation. I guess to kind of wrap it up, to summarize, you know, once you know your whys and hows of what you want to do and how you want to communicate your science, if you think that a visual would help, maybe try making your own or even animating it. And there are widely available tools to play with that. You can start just playing around in PowerPoint, or if you want to try it, Sketchbook. And sometimes it also doesn't have to be super serious, where you want to change on other people's life, but it's also sometimes it can be for yourself, and that's not that's also a valid reason to do it. So yeah, I hope this kind of inspires you to make illustrations and sketches. If you have any questions, I think I finished a little bit early, so we can have as many questions as can fit the rest of the time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Irene. Let's give Irene and Liz again a big round of virtual applause, please, everyone. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I certainly feel inspired, informed, and I learned something new. So thank you so much. And now we'll open the floor for any questions first for Irene and Liz. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hands and go on mute. Questions or comments? Anything is, yeah, Liz, please.
I have a really technical question for Irene. How do you choose a frame rate that doesn't make people queasy?
Oh, good point.
Like,
Yeah,
do you have
that's
a
a good
go-to
question.
frame rate?
So okay, honest answer, I don't. Maybe that's something I have to think about. Yeah, that's something I've not think about before, but that is something that is definitely important to think about when thinking about your audience. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
I think like the frame rate for like watching TV or cartoons that are animated is at least 30 frames per second. So that could be a starting point.
And I see Darren's hand is up. Please go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Liz and Irene, for those amazing presentations. I had a quick question for both of you. Would you be able to share how much time you invest, for example, the timing aspect of it and how much effort you put into the work that you're doing? I think that can sometimes get buried, like looking at the animation, for example, from Irene, I was like, oh, I could do that easily. But then I realized how many minutes or hours it can take to make that 1 minute video animation. And then for Liz, I know that you probably think about all the research that goes into potentially just one written piece can be weeks in advance, but I'd love to just hear what that timing is and bandwidth aspect that you both deal with in your work.
Would you like to answer first, or should I? I can go first since I
Irene,
started.
go ahead.
That's an important question, because you're right. A lot of the times, effort doing science communication is overlooked, and it does take a lot of effort. And you're right in mentioning that, like, a simple 1 minute video. That particular one took me 16 hours to make, so it's not trivial. And of course, it also varies with the experience you already have. So the less experienced you are, if you want to tackle more challenging projects, it can take more time. But the more experience you get, it can get easier. But I guess the bottom line is it's not trivial, and as much as possible, whenever, like, if you're doing it for yourself, for your research, for your science, I think it's really worth it investing the time. But once you get to doing it for other people, do know that, like, make its worth and your worth known. Don't do stuff for free, if possible. Yeah, so that's my answer.
Yeah, I totally agree with Irene. Don't work for free. But also, like, science communication always takes longer than people think it will take. And so I don't have a good answer, because it totally depends on what I'm doing, right? It took me 3 years to write my book. It takes me between 5 minutes and 2 hours to write a social media post, depending on what it is. But I think the bottom line is that it does always take longer than people assume, especially if you're really thinking through, like, what is my audience, what's my goal. Like, you can't, once you sort of get into a rhythm, you can do that faster, but it's still, you have to think about it. And I think that's important. That's why it's important that there are dedicated science communicators and scientists learn how to communicate their work, because if you're a scientist, you got to also be doing your science. So it's important for you to be able to communicate your work, but you also should have a network of people who are science communicators full time that you can lean on, who can help you with that. And it's also why I said at the end of my presentation, like, watch out for burnout, because it is real easy to end up there.
Thank you, Irene and Liz.
Nice. Any other questions from the group?
I noted this in the chat, but if you put a question in my Jamboard, I did answer it in sequence.
Thank you, Liz. And Rose, you have a question. Also, Mariama, yeah, feel free to unmute and be part of the conversation. Rose, would you like to ask your question in person? I can read it too if you like.
I have a baby here, if you don't mind reading. Sorry.
Sounds good. Yeah, so Rose is asking, what career options are there for science communication and science animation? Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure Liz also has answers. I'll start with mine. So that's a really good question. I tried, so before landing this job that I have now, I tried searching for science communication jobs, because after doing my postdoc, I thought I wanted to do something else, maybe towards science communication. And so I started looking for science communication jobs. And first thing I noticed is that you cannot simply type science communication job and expect that that long list of science communication jobs that are out there. A lot of times they are named differently. And one of the positions I applied for, which in my head is a science communication job, but it's called like a graphic designer position, or it's like a communication director, or social media social media manager, or something like that. It can be called different things, and because sometimes not many science communication is still very, I guess, underappreciated, and so it's not creation. Positions are not created specifically for it many times, and it can take form of other positions. So if you are someone who may be interested in doing it, don't limit your searches or even your applications to just science communication positions. But there are a lot, so so just keep searching.
I don't have a lot to add to that. I think that's totally true. I've been a social media coordinator. I've been a community coordinator. I am a writer. But basically it's like anything in sort of the circle of science communication. There's movement toward professionalizing the field, but I think it's a lot, like there are a lot of ways in, depending on your interests.
Thank you so much. These are just so cool. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Nice. All right. And Mariama, you have a question. Yes.
Yeah. I appreciate the note of burnout with science communication. And I think it's I'd love to just hear both of your thoughts on how to navigate identifying that, because often in my experience, folks who are doing science communication beyond sometimes broader impacts are really passionate about it. And that can be a part of like not knowing that you're burning out. So I'm just curious if you both could speak to it.
Yeah, with the caveat that like a mental health professional could give a much more comprehensive answer than I can. I think that the signs of burnout are pretty individual, but like things that I notice is I'm not interested in being creative. Like I did social media for one organization for 5 years. And by the end of it, I was like going back to earlier posts and copying and pasting them basically and being like, here's the same fun fact. And I was not interested in finding out new stuff. And so like the fact that I wasn't curious was not a good sign. Or the fact that I'm dreading starting work, or I don't want to get out of bed. Those are things that definitely are, or like if I'm taking things really personally. So someone's like, that joke you kept telling over and over again in your presentation, like actually really wasn't funny. And I'd be like, how dare you? Like, I'm going to go cry for half an hour. Like, that's a good sign to me that maybe I'm feeling a little touchy. But yeah, I think learning the signs in yourself are really important.
Totally agree with what Liz said. And when I went through burnout, I also like took things very, very personally. Like someone in my group said, oh, I was sick and I did this and that project. And I was like, I wasn't sick and I didn't do it. So I must be so bad as a scientist. And it's just a little too much. And that was that was kind of one of my signs, and also just dreading starting the day. So yeah, and as they said, if you start maybe feeling these signs, a mental health professional can lead you to a better direction.
I will also add that, as I understand it, there is no cure for burnout other than rest. You cannot push through burnout. So not that I would try to do that ever and have tried to do it and failed miserably, you got to rest.
Yes, totally agree with everything, 100%. Nice. So any other questions, comments? All right. Hearing none, again, thank you so much, Liz and Irene. Again, God, you guys deserve another big virtual round of applause. And now we go on our agenda. We have some of our community announcements and also upcoming activities for AFSA. I'll turn it over to Lowell for those.
Yeah, this is a very fantastic workshop, and I really have to thank both Liz and Irene for making the time to come over and teach us with their knowledge and wisdom. So I'm going to go forth with what's on the calendar. AFSA has had a pretty busy time. We just had yesterday our fireside chat with Pase, and then we have our workshop. Keep an eye on social media and your emails because it is around the time where we might expect to have a new nominations for the executive committee. And we'll be sharing a few opportunities to kind of build our anniversary event. This is what our theme is going to be for this year, for the anniversary next month, Hulaan, planting the seeds for a brighter future. We still have to make the Zoom link, of course, but this is just to get a good idea of where and when our anniversary event is going to be. In terms of other concrete announcements, October 11th, keep an eye on the next workshop. We'll be having a workshop on resume and CV development. And then, of course, our anniversary will be this Saturday at October 22nd. Times are dependent on your time zone. Opportunities for involvement. We have our bread and butter of the documentation and publicity committee will always need help. For documentation, we draft future newsletters and organize filings and mailing lists. Our docu chair, who isn't here, is Justin Vika. You can contact him or use the AFSA official Gmail. Asta, who also isn't here, she is the publicity chair, and publicity committee does design graphics for next month's events. If you're interested, you can contact Asta or the AFSA official Gmail. It'll help you get y'all really sorted. Short-term committees, as I was mentioning, elections will be in the foreseeable future, as well as the anniversary event. Justin and I are actually the anniversary co-heads. We have established a theme. We're getting our speakers kind of wrapped up. We'll hope to announce that really soon. We definitely need a lot of help with the publicity and the programming leading up to, during, and following up the anniversary event. They are going to become every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or you can convert that to whatever time zone that you're in. And we are still looking for volunteers for the elections committee. And what they do is that they facilitate the elections for next year's executive board. Only caveat is this: if you volunteer or decide to volunteer with us to elections committee, you cannot be nominated for the executive board next year. So think about your choices. If you really want to help out, you can contact us using our official Gmail. And whenever we have enough people, we'll announce when the elections committee meeting is going to be. We are living in a time of hurricanes and climate catastrophe, as with other things. So here is a donation page for those in the Philippines by Scoops for calls for donation volunteers. This is for monetary and in-kind donations in Quezon City and other areas of the Philippines. Typhoon Noros has smashed into the Philippines, as well as other donation opportunities. This is a very good opportunity to take a quick screenshot in 3, 2, 1. Hopefully you got that. And if you want to keep in touch, this QR code to the left is the Welcome to AFSA channel in our Slack. And if you're not an AFSA membership form, scan this QR code to fill out the membership form here. That's how we get our emails and updates. This is another quick chance to get a screenshot in 3, 2, 1. And hopefully you got yourself that screenshot. And we thank you very much for coming. Definitely kind of take a look at this link that has a link to all of our events and other opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. This concludes the end of our workshop. If people are interested, I can still open this room if you want to do some informal chatting, but we hope that you have a good rest of the day. We hope that you learned something, and we'll see y'all next time.
Yes,
Take
and
a
we'd like to
photo.
request a group photo, Kalai, sorry.
Group photos.
Thank you. Sorry, if we can, who's sharing the screen? Sorry.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. There you go.
There you go. Thank you. Who's counting?
I can take it.
All right, thanks, Kalai.
3, 2, 1. Smile. All right, I got it. Thank you so much.